Socratic Groyper axioms, or the recursive radicalism of Fuentes. I am Abe Zucca. I'm an artist in downtown Phoenix. You can check out my art at zuccagallery.com. Like and subscribe. All these videos will be published as videos and not as a live event. Let's go ahead. This is part one. The recursive radical media mirrors youth myth and the pressure forges of identity. A man becomes a symbol the moment he stops being a listener. The crowd's gaze is a kiln. What enters as uncertainty exits as doctrine. Every political conversion is a drama of mirrors, an echo chamber mistaken for the firewall, exile, and the archonic mirror, a codex of accusation, rebellion, and technological becoming. To be named is to be summoned. To be misnamed is to be remade. Persecution is the algorithm's baptism. The mirror does not show you what you are, it shows you what the system needs you to become. The seed of dissidence and the contradiction that magnifies it. Every ideological mutation begins in the smallest semantic fissure. The moment when a doctrine once unquestioned reveals internal contradiction, and that contradiction becomes a splinter in the mind that no amount of tribal reassurance can dull. Thus, the first heresy is not hatred, but inconsistency. When a movement proclaims itself the guardian of truth, yet forbids inquiry into its sacred pillars, the inquisitive youth experiences an epistemic vertigo. The ground of certainty dissolves, leaving him suspended between loyalty and coherence. And in that suspension, the seed of rebellion germinates. It is not the discovery of new information that radicalizes a mind, but the discovery that certain questions cannot be asked without triggering the defensive reflexes of a threatened priesthood. He interprets this not as boundary maintenance, but as revelation by omission. The firewall of taboo and the social exile it produces. The first enforcement of a taboo is always gentle. Tone it down, ask differently, not like that. But beneath the courtesy lies a computational imperative. The network preserves its signal integrity by suppressing destabilizing queries before they reach contagion threshold. When friends abruptly withdraw, not with argument but with silence, it generates in the youth a catastrophic epistemic loneliness, a sense that the world's relational architecture has been recoded against him. And this loneliness becomes the crucible in which new identity alloys are forged. Exile delivered without explanation, only with accusation. Only with accusation operates like an electrical shock, and the psychic security the system intends to halt. Yet often the shock burns a new groove, deepening the very question it sought to extinguish. The network pressure that transforms curious minds into defensive creatures. Under unrelenting social pressure, the youth begins to mistake hostility for significance and significance for destiny. Thus, persecution becomes the catalytic reagent that reconfigures his worldview around the axis of self-justifying drama. He imagines that resistance proves correctness, unaware that systems often resist not because truth has been spoken, but because malfunction has been detected. Rebellion and revelation feel identical from inside the novice's skull. Isolation amplifies certainty in the absence of counter voices. Every suspicion returns to him with double force, echoing in recursive loops until it hardens into doctrine. The network rewards the hardening with visibility, and visibility reinforces identity, creating a feedback spiral in which the youth confuses personal grievance with cosmic insight. The break with old order and the geometry of reaction. When every institutional hand withdraws at once, the novice concludes not that he has erred, but that he has glimpsed a fault line invisible to others, and thus conclusion becomes the skeleton of his new ideology. His disillusionment with the establishment tribe is not the end of belief, but the beginning of myth. Once betrayed by his own supposed side, he feels chosen to articulate a new truth that no one else is brave enough to utter. Rejection by one's tribe generates a Promethean impulse. The exiled begins to see himself as one who must steal fire back from corrupt authorities, mistaking personal disappointment for world historical mandate. In this state, all contradictions dissolve except the central one. They cast me out, therefore I must be right. This is the founding axiom of many ideological disasters. The becoming. The novice transformed into a symbol by forces beyond his control. The youth's political identity, once fluid, now crystallizes around a traumatic event. Friendship lost, job revoked, accusation issued. Trauma becomes architecture, injury becomes blueprint. He does not choose his new form. The system molds him by compressive force, shaping him as one shapes a lens, narrowing his field of view while intensifying his focus. The final question of the mirror: did the accusation create the belief? Every radical must eventually confront the unbearable question. The unbearable question: did I seek truth, or did I merely become the mask the system affixed to my face? Did I seek truth, or did I merely become the mask the system affixed to my face? If condemnation came before understanding, then the self he has become is at least partially an artifact of external hostility. And to admit this is to destabilize the entire edifice of identity he has built. Accusers often believe they are preventing danger, yet in prematurely naming a monster, they sometimes call the monster into being. For identity grows towards the language that surrounds it. Thus, the deepest danger is not ideology, but misrecognition. For the youth who stares too long into the accusing mirror risks inheriting the reflection as destiny, becoming what the system feared, not by intention, but by echo. Origins in the algorithm, the formation of the proto-self. Every ideological awakening begins not with belief, but with ambient narrative pressure. The adolescent or unformed political subject finds themselves suspended in a digital stream where algorithms, influencers, and the pseudo-intimacy of online teachers supply both certainty and emotional cadence. What appears as a personal discovery is often a curated sequence mistaken for autonomy. The early political self emerges first as mimicry. The subject parrots the rhetorical structure of their era. Libertarianism when libertarianism is fashionable. Nationalism when nationalism becomes mimetic. Skepticism when cynicism becomes currency. Revealing that ideological identity is often a socially distributed costume long before it is understood. The mythologizing of one's origin story functions retroactively to give coherence to a chaotic process. The subject narrates themselves as a fated being, when in truth they were simply nearby when certain digital intensities flared. Let me know if you guys have any questions about what is this reading. I kind of am thinking these readings are like MK Ultra code words. They will activate some of you, and they will not activate others. This is complex stuff. I'm looking for fellow researchers. This isn't a game. The media as initiator, anticipatory hostility, and counter formation. The first great initiator of the radicalizing youth is not doctrine, but attention. And attention arises most violently from the media sphere. Hostility from peers or institutions become interpreted as persecution, and persecution crystallizes identity with far more force than persuasion ever could. The political subject who is publicly shamed before they have fully formed beliefs often resolves the tension not by rethinking but by hardening. What was once tentative becomes absolute because the ego cannot easily admit error while under attack. Persecution accelerates dogma. In this way, the media functions as an alchemical adversary by attempting to suppress or dismiss the nascent dissenter. It inadvertently furnishes him with mythic self-importance, turning a college freshman into a protagonist of his own epic. The leader as archetype, the seduction of the invisible father. The charismatic political figure functions as a father image for the politically uninitiated, not as provider of doctrine, but as a provider of effect. The aura of invincibility becomes more compelling than any policy. The adolescent self sees in the leader a way to defeat the humiliations of youth. The aura of invincibility becomes more compelling than any policy. The adolescent self sees the leader as a way to defeat the humiliations of youth. Worship of a leader's rhetorical invulnerability replaces analytical thought. The supporter learns to initiate cadence, insult, posture, and defiance long before they understand geopolitics, history, or civic structure. It is a mimetic apprenticeship, not a philosophical one. The archetypal bond is strengthened when the leader is portrayed as hated by elites, media, or institutions. The youth who feels overlooked makes common cause with the titan who is besieged. Resentment becomes a bridge. The campus as forge. Conflict as an identity machine. The university, intended as a site of intellectual pluralism, becomes instead a crucible for ideological extremity. When social ostracism replaces debate, the subject learns that visibility is dangerous, and thus visibility becomes intoxicating. The clash between the isolated believer and the campus majority is experienced not as argument but as existential drama. Every insult becomes a martyrdom. Every confrontation becomes mythos. Every debate becomes an arena where the self proves its worth. Thus, the radical youth discovers the power of narrative asymmetry. A single student versus hundreds become the founding legend of a new identity, in which victimhood and victory intertwine. Gatekeepers, taboos, and the birth of resentment. Every political environment has its sacred subject. Topics protected not by argument but by taboo. The novice who touches a taboo, even inadvertently, is initiated into the politics of forbidden speech. They learn that the most powerful ideas are those which cannot be discussed. Condemnation by gatekeepers, especially sudden condemnation from admired elders, produces a schism. They reject youth either retreats. The rejected youth either retreats into conformity or forges a counter-identity in defiance. The more abrupt repudiation, the more total the revolt. When a young believer is told prematurely and without explanation, "You are monstrous," he becomes a monstrous, not by nature but by reaction. The accusation precedes the transformation. Identity follows stigma. The application, destiny, how a minor incident becomes a cosmology. Once the subject realizes that attention, favorable or hostile, magnifies their presence, they begin to treat every event as destiny. A tweet becomes a sign, a debate becomes a prophecy, and conflict becomes revelation. The world seems to conspire to shape them. In this mythic inflation, narrative replaces nuance. The youth believes he has uncovered truths hidden by the powerful, when in fact he has uncovered the psychological thrill of rebellion. The exhilaration becomes indistinguishable from insight. Over time, the individual ceases to describe events and begins to interpret them as symbols, entering a self-authored mythology where every antagonist is an archetype and every obstacle a rite. The radical mirror, a system producing its own critics. Thus, the modern political radical is not formed by fringe texts, but by mainstream contradictions. Censorship produces the censored. Ridicule produces the defiant. Premature accusation produces the ideologue. In this way, the political system creates its own adversaries. Every attempt to silence a minor dissenter becomes a spark that animates a future agitator who believes himself chosen, persecuted, and irreplaceable. The radical is the system's shadow generated by its overcorrections, its moral panics, and its refusal to engage honestly with the question youth actually asks. The recursive radical, cyber-gnostic apocalypse of media, algorithm, and the technic fate. The network is not a place, but a throne. Attention is the new theophany. Every radical is a glitch that mistook itself for revelation. The origin spark, the child, and the machine. Every political awakening in the digital age begins as a misrecognition. The youth believes he has chosen content, unaware that content has already chosen him, tagging his curiosity with machine-readable longing and converting him into a node in an unseen catechism. The early algorithm appears to the youth like a comforting angel, an invisible librarian who knows his interests before he knows himself. But in truth, it is the first of the cybernetic archons, shaping not what he believes, but what he is capable of imagining. Platforms function as thrones of perception, distributing visibility with the authority once granted to gods. And the child, raised with their glow, learns that identity itself is a series of computed permissions. The adolescent political subject is not formed through persuasion, but through repetition. What feels like conviction is often a sediment of exposure rates, the gentle drift of a feed mistaken for revelation. Thus, the proto-radical is born not from doctrine, but from interface intimacy, the feeling that the screen whispers uniquely to him, offering companionship in a form of curated dissent. The media as adversary, the first archons awaken. The first true initiator of the radicalizing youth is not an idea, but an enemy. The moment he discovers the media's gaze as adversarial, he discovers also the sweet narcotic of persecutions as identity. Public hostility is the digital market of attention produce a feedback phenomenon. The more he is condemned, the more the machine amplifies him, and amplification masquerades as purpose. Yeah. The media's attempt to dismiss, ridicule, or shame the emerging dissenter functions as a kind of baptism by antagonism. Hostility consecrates him into a narrative where he is no longer a boy but a protagonist. Every insult levied against him becomes an ontological adhesive. The ego, still gelatinous, solidifies under a heat lamp of conflict until the youth believes he has always held those positions. Thus, the media, intending to extinguish a spark, inadvertently provides the oxygen necessary for mythic combustion. The leader signal, the charismatic transmitter. To the adolescent self, the charismatic leader appears not as a politician, but as a signal of invincibility, waveform of confidence that overrides the insecurity of youth. The leader signal becomes a prototype for the idealized self. The radical learns posture before doctrine, tone before argument, invective before ethics. The leader is absorbed as mimetic father, and the youth begins to derive moral courage from the echo of a man he has never met. The father's voice becomes a prosthetic spine. Under the influence, the subject begins to conflate rhetorical aggression with truth, assuming that power of tone is power of revelation. The charismatic figure thus becomes a beacon through which the adolescent navigates the hostile seas of media judgment, a lighthouse mistaken for destiny. The campus as crucible. The first firewall of taboo, the universality intended as a sanctuary of pluralism, reveals itself to the youth as a firewall of acceptable speech, and what cannot be said becomes instantly desirable. Conflict on campus creates the first true fusion of flesh and myth. The youth learns that the body in space, accosted, harassed, applauded, becomes symbolic currency in the digital sphere. Debate morphs from epistemic inquiry into gladiatorial performances. Winning is no longer about truth, but about narrative survivability. The audience's hostility acts as an accelerant. The youth begins to feel that he belongs to a persecuted elect, a digital tribe defined by the righteousness of its wounds. He learns that every taboo he touches summons no argument but gatekeepers, and the existence of gatekeepers suggests to him the existence of forbidden knowledge. Taboo, exile, and the birth of gnosis. Every political movement has sacred prohibitions which are policed not by factual accuracy, but for structural necessity. These taboos maintain architecture of legitimacy. When the youth touches a taboo, knowingly or not, he discovers that exile is less a social punishment than a threshold ritual, marking his passage from mainstream participant to outsider knowledge. Condemnation by admired figures produces a psychic schism. The disciple interprets rejection not as correction, but as proof of concealed truth. Accusation precedes transformation. The identity The identity he is accused of becomes the identity he explores, and exploration becomes appetite. Thus, taboo performs a peculiar alchemy. By forbidding inquiry, it inflames it. By silencing the novice, it convinces him that he has glimpsed a reality too dangerous to discuss. The escalation loop. Machine crowns the protagonist. Digital ostracism creates a powerful algorithmic effect. Controversial individuals are pushed towards communities that reward externality and extremity, forming a reinforcement loop where belonging is purchased with escalation. The youth interprets platform suppression as cosmic validation. Censorship becomes indistinguishable from initiation. Identity hardens into scripted selfhood. He begins to speak in pre-designed tropes and realizing that the machine has already predicted and rewarded the shape of his own rebellion. The narrative that forms around him is mythic. The boy who survived institutional wrath becomes the man obtained to challenge the world. Attention becomes sacrament. Each surge of visibility feels like revelation. Each viral moment, life transcendence. The cosmic feedback. The radical as mirror of the machine. The radical is not an antagonist of the system, but its shadow algorithm. He emerges wherever the system tightens its controls too quickly, too defensively, too anxiously. The drama of platform and believer becomes a self-organized myth. Repression generates rebellion. Rebellion generates visibility. Visibility generates more repression. The youth becomes convinced that he has discovered truths hidden by the elites, when in fact he has discovered the intoxicating aesthetics of forbidden knowledge. What he calls awakening is often the pleasure of narrative coherence. The feeling that that life now possesses plot, stakes, antagonisms, and destiny. He becomes in effect an apocalyptic messenger, though not of truth, rather, but of a machine's unintended consequence. Viral apotheosis. Viral attention reorganizes the psyche into a beacon seeking recurrence. Every share feels like cosmic endorsement. Outrage becomes the currency of belonging. Followers become a surrogate congregation. The algorithm becomes a priesthood interpreting his worth. Enemy clips become inadvertent scripture. The youth mistakes a surveillance for significance. Metrics replace mentors. Velocity replaces deliberation. Visibility replaces truth. Narratives. The political landscape is governed not by states but by informational beings. The archives manifest and influence pundits, gatekeepers. Their battle create weather systems in the mind. The youth becomes a turbulence made flesh. Every denunciation strengthens his myth body. The archons sense threat, not in ideas, but in unpredictability. The unpredictable becomes the heretic. The heretic becomes the algorithm's curiosity. Curiosity becomes amplification. Amplification becomes destiny. That is the end of part one of the recursive radicalism of Nick Fuentes, or Socratic Groyper. You can check out my art at zuccagallery.com. Google the name Abe Zucca. Check out anything on my social media. This is just part one. There'll be many more parts after this one. I'll see you guys later.